Good morning, everybody. Again, just to remind you, I'm speaking with this temporary denture, so hopefully you can hear me okay. I want to have a look this morning at three examples from the Bible. Now, I don't want to say at this point what they are examples of. I'm hoping you'll pick it up as we go along. So the first example I want to look at is the example of Solomon. So we're going to commence the first reading from the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 11 and verse 1. 2 Samuel, chapter 11 and verse 1. It happened in the spring of the year, at the time when kings go out to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him, and all Israel. And they destroyed the people of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. Then it happened one evening that David arose from his bed and walked on the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful to behold. So David sent and inquired about the woman. And someone said, "Is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" Then David sent messengers and took her, and she came to him, and he lay with her, for she was cleansed from her impurity, and she returned to her house. And the woman conceived, so she sent and told David and said, "I am with child." Then David sent to Joab, saying, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." And Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah had come to him, David asked how Joab was doing, and how the people were doing, and how the war prospered. And David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." So Uriah departed from the king's house, and the gift of food from the king followed him. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house, with all the servants of his lord, and did not go down to his house. So when they told David, saying, "Uriah did not go down to his house," David said to Uriah, "Did you not come from a journey? Why did you not go down to your house?" And Uriah said to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah are dwelling in tents, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are encamped in the open fields. Shall I then go to my house to eat and drink and to lie with my wife? As you live, and as your soul lives, I will not do this thing." Then David said to Uriah, "Wait here today also, and tomorrow I will let you depart." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. Now when David called him, he ate and drank before him, and he made him drunk. And at evening he went out to lie on his bed with the servants of his lord, but he did not go down to his house. In the morning it happened that David wrote a letter to Joab, and sent it by the hand of Uriah. And he wrote in the letter, saying, "Set Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle, and retreat from him, that he may be struck down and die." So it was, while Joab besieged the city, that he assigned Uriah to a place where he knew there were valiant men. Then the men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the people of the servants of David fell, and Uriah the Hittite died also. So I think we're all pretty familiar with this story of David. Pretty sad and disgusting stuff. It speaks for itself. I don't really need to add to it. But what is interesting, if we go into the following chapter, we read in verses 24 and 25 these words. Then David comforted Bathsheba his wife, and went into her and lay with her. So she bore a son, and he called his name Solomon. Now the Lord loved him. And he, that is God, sent word by the hand of Nathan the prophet. So he called his name Jedediah, because of the Lord. So, although the first child between David and Bathsheba died, the second one was Solomon, and God loved him. And the name Jedediah there literally means beloved of the Lord. And this is Solomon, who for all his faults built the temple and is in the line of Joseph. As it says in Matthew chapter 1, Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, who is called Christ. So the second example I want to look at is the example of Joseph. And we're going to pick the story up in Genesis chapter 37 and beginning at verse 17. And we read these words. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. Now when they saw him afar off, even before he came near them, they conspired against him to kill him. Then they said to one another, Look, this dreamer is coming. Come therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit, and we shall say some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what becomes of his dreams. But Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, Let us not kill him. And Reuben said to them, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands, and bring him back to his father. So it came to pass, when Joseph had come to his brothers, that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the tunic of many colours that was on him. Then they took him and cast him into a pit. And the pit was empty, there was no water in it. And they sat down to eat a meal. Then they lifted their eyes and looked, and there was a company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices, balm, and myrrh, on their way to carry them down to Egypt. So Judah said to his brothers, What profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brothers listened. Then Midianite traders passed by. So the brothers pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. So again, another sad example of things going badly wrong. The envy and the hatred of Joseph's brothers. Joseph didn't help himself, but there was no justification for what they did. And yet later on, of course, in the book of Genesis, we read these words, taken from Genesis chapter 50 and beginning at verse 15. Genesis chapter 50 and verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, Perhaps Joseph will hate us, and may actually repay us for all the evil which we did to him. So they sent messengers to Joseph, saying, Before your father died, he commanded, saying, Thus you shall say to Joseph, I beg you, please forgive the trespass of your brothers and their sin, for they did evil to you. Now please, forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of your father. And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also went and fell down before his face, and said, Behold, we are your servants. Joseph said to them, Do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about, as it is this day, to save many people alive. And so again, a well-known example of somebody who suffered evil, and yet out of that evil something good came. And finally, of course, I want to look at the greatest example of all, and that is the example of Jesus. And first of all, I want to very quickly look at the betrayal, and we're going to take these from the Gospel of Mark, and the first one is Mark chapter 14 and verse 43. And immediately, while he, that is, Jesus, was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, with a great multitude, with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. Now his betrayer had given them a signal, saying, "Whomever I kiss, he is the one. Seize him and lead him away safely." As soon as he had come, immediately he went up to him and said to him, "Rabbi, Rabbi," and kissed him. Then they laid their hands on him and took him. Pretty disgusting stuff. And now I want to have a quick look at the trial, or the sham trial of Jesus. Mark chapter 14 verse 55. Now the chief priests and all the council sought testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. For many bore false witness against him, but their testimonies did not agree. Then some rose up and bore false witness against him, saying, "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple made with hands, and within 3 days I will build another made without hands.' But not even then did their testimony agree. And the high priest stood up in the midst and asked Jesus, saying, 'Do you answer nothing? What is it these men testify against you?' But he kept silent and answered nothing. Again the high priest asked him, saying to him, 'Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed?' Jesus said, 'I am. And you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming with the clouds of heaven.' Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, 'What further need do we have of witnesses? You have heard the blasphemy. What do you think?' And they all condemned him to be deserving of death." And then, of course, we go on, and we'll just read a few verses regarding the actual crucifixion. So Pilate, wanting to gratify the crowd, released Barabbas to them. Obviously, I'm assuming a certain background knowledge of these things. And he delivered Jesus, after he had scourged him, to be crucified. Then the soldiers led him away into the hall called Praetorium, and they called together the whole garrison. And they clothed him with purple, and they twisted a crown of thorns, put it on his head, and began to salute him. "Hail, King of the Jews!" Then they struck him on the head with a reed and spat on him, and bowing the knee, they worshipped him. And when they had mocked him, they took the purple off him, put his own clothes on him, and led him out to crucify him. Well, again, I think it speaks for itself. Finally, of course, I just want to read a few verses regarding the burial. So from verse 43, Joseph of Arimathea, a prominent council member who was himself waiting for the kingdom of God, coming and taking courage, went into Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Pilate marveled that he was already dead, and summoning the centurion, he asked him if he had been dead for some time. So when he found out from the centurion, he granted the body to Joseph. Then he bought fine linen, took him down, and wrapped him in the linen. And he laid him in a tomb which had been hewn out of the rock, and rolled a stone against the door of the tomb. And yet we know, of course, after all of that evil, the shameful betrayal, the hideous mock trial, the cruel crucifixion, and what appears to be the final chapter in the story, the burial, of course, comes the glory of the resurrection. And very briefly, a few verses from Mark 16, beginning at verse 9. Now when he rose early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had cast 7 demons. She went and told those who had been with him, as they mourned and wept. And when they heard that he was alive and had been seen by her, they did not believe. After that, he appeared in another form to 2 of them, as they walked and went into the country. And they went and told it to the rest, but they did not believe them either. Later he appeared to the 11 as they sat at the table, and he rebuked their unbelief and hardness of heart, because they did not believe those who had seen him after he had risen. So I think obviously it just sort of speaks for itself. It's not a particularly profound point I have to bring out from all this. I'm sorry if it was a little bit long this morning. But basically the point is simply this: God can bring good out of evil. And that's any form, whether it's something that is striking a nation or a family or an individual, out of any situation, God can bring good out of it. And I just hope that in this time, as we're still labouring under lockdown and we know that individual members of the fellowship are suffering, I just want you to be encouraged that God's in control, he knows what he's doing, and one way or another he will bring good out of this. Thank you, and let's continue with our service.